We are living in a new era, the deepest technological revolution in human history.
Hello, everyone who enjoyed this video. Thank you. Who is loving being back at MWC? Yes, yeah, so many hands. Who is excited to learn about Metaverse? Woohoo, yeah, oh, the whole room. So we have a very exciting agenda for you and some amazing speakers. We'll start with 3 presentations, Movandi, Orange, and Sienna. And then we will have a panel of very experienced technologists and marketers talking about the architectures that needed for Metaverse and the use cases. And they are representatives from Dell, Deutsche Telekom, Linux Foundation, and Wheeling. So let me welcome on stage our first presenter, Miriam. Take it away.
Thank you, Eugina. I am Miriam, and I'm the CEO of Movandi Corporation. And we have been focusing on addressing and solving the challenges of 5G millimeter wave and enabling Metaverse. So imagine a world where you have unlimited possibilities, a world where you can be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. A world where basically you can be a designer, a fashion designer, or a gamer fighting in your fantasy world with dragons. Or you can basically go to school or go to office, basically a lot of impossible things that you cannot imagine can be done. This is the world of Metaverse. It's a world where it's a way of life. It's not really just a virtual reality. So by combining and bringing digital and physical world together, integrating locations, imaging, as well as the artificial intelligence, we bring the experience, an exciting experience of bringing people together. And that's the main point of Metaverse. It's really exciting because it makes things happen that you have never imagined before. Now, as I mentioned, this is a way of life. This is a bridge between the worlds. And this Metaverse can enable, I'm sorry, I'm looking here, it's different from there. This Metaverse can enable many new applications in areas that basically require very, very real-time and sensitive time applications. So it has to be very low latency. The applications have to be in a way that you can support very time-sensitive, but at the same time, extensive and intensive kind of throughput. And this will happen when we have a lot of people participating in 5G, and especially 5G millimeter wave, because the lowest latency that millimeter wave and also the throughput that it can support, it enables these real 5G experiences. It can create opportunities in areas such as autonomous cars that people have been talking about, Industrial 4.0, telemedicine, healthcare, and all these applications that really require very, very fast speed and lowest latency. And this all can happen in 5G millimeter wave. So in this world, basically, Metaverse is very sensitive to the environment. It can bring, basically, it can find out what's happening in the system, in the environment, what some of the parameters can be measured, such as temperature, speed, location, and it brings the reality and virtual all together so that you really feel like you're present in a location, and it creates a different kind of real experiences for everyone. So far, everything has been, all the metaverse has been limited to a room or a spot. Going forward in the future, it'll really be more mobile. When I say mobile, I'm not talking about ubiquitous coverage, but I'm talking about locations like hotspots, venues, stadiums, areas that have a lot of population, dense areas. And those are the kind of things that will be happening in the future, and Metaverse will become a real thing, something that lives with everyone. Now, there are networks around us, but none of them are really supporting the Metaverse that we are expecting to happen. Most of the cases that we have today are very downlink-centric, and they require some sort of latencies, but none of them are really the ones that we would call the future Metaverse. Metaverse will drive very high data rates, throughput. It will require very, very low latencies in 5 millisecond kind of range. And it will also need to be symmetric on downlink and uplink, because a lot of these applications are not just downlink, it's interactive, and you have to be able to send information, huge amount of information. And also some of it has to be done locally, so edge processing will take a lot more importance for this metaverse to happen. And as I mentioned, because there are going to be many people in this metaverse and this world, it has to support huge amount of data, gigabits kind of range. And at the same time, this basically have to be supported with a system and a standard that's really standard, and it's not priority, because if it's limited to one location, it cannot expand, and this metaverse is really more about use cases and not use places. So I have to be able to go from here to outside and factory everywhere, and I still have the same kind of access and experience. And this all can happen basically with 5G millimeter wave that can bring the lowest latency as well as support huge amount of data with high bandwidth. And that's what we have been working on. Now, if you look at the data and what networks are supporting today, so far right now, as we speak, the amount of data are actually overwhelming our LTE network. The usage of basically the capacity and usage number has increased the data. And now we're going to sub-6, but that will also very soon be kind of saturated, and we're going to run out of bandwidth. With everything that's happening with fixed wireless access, and you hear everyone now excited about fixed wireless access, and then you have mobility and the usage of mobile data. So that's why, going forward, we really need a solution, a network that it's not just for today. It has to be built in a way that you can support the future amount of data and all these applications that we're talking about. And you can see basically how the data and the information has been increasing over the past, from 2022 to 2028. So we need a network that can support the future, which has metaverse in it. 5G millimeter wave can enable this future. It's essential for this future. Again, today, We already have solutions. We have done, some of the, there have been cases where companies have done some demonstrations. They're doing the first step of Metaverse, and this is inside a room, very local. But again, these are just the first step. And as the standard which is evolving, is going to support more and more Metaverse and bring more capability into it. And as we get more usage and we get more data, we're going to have to be able to support a huge number of devices, and we need more bandwidth, and that's where you go, and lowest latency. Again, this lowest latency and throughput are really, at the end of the day, mainly have to go to higher bandwidth where you can support all this data. And this is something that basically, as we grow and as we do more Metaverse and the ecosystem for that grows, it's going to become even more and more problem, because then you're going to have even more of data that's going to need bandwidth. Now, let me show you how this 5G millimeter wave and Metaverse get connected in a real case study. So we have done many, actually we have been working with many different operators as well as companies, and we have products that today are being used to extend and make sure some of the issues with the 5G goes away. But so 5G millimeter wave is real. The benefits of it has been spoken about. It brings low latency, it provides very, very high data rate, but it also has some challenges with the coverage and some challenges with the cost. And if those can be addressed, it basically makes sure that the future network is upgraded and it can support the Metaverse, the real Metaverse. And this is something that we have been working on. So this is an office in LA, which basically there is a base station across the street. And if you look at it, there's only one, let me just go to there's only one window that gets some coverage around that. So this office has no coverage. You see the cell phones not connected. What we have done, we have put a smart repeater at the window, another one at the corner, and basically we get full coverage inside the building. And these are very low cost. It's almost like Wi-Fi comparable. And you do see that all of a sudden you get coverage, you get very high throughput at very low cost from the network outside. So we have basically ensured that you get the high throughput, the lowest latency. They add really negligible latency and cost comparable to Wi-Fi. And so as a conclusion, you can see that it's possible to do Metaverse. It requires millimeter wave. And what we have done, we have been working on basically enabling low-cost deployment of 5G. Repeaters are essential because you can't go and build a whole lot of base stations or small cells. It's important to have the standard continue supporting it and basically bringing intelligence into the system. And it's important to have devices that are low cost and they can become commercial, and that also needs improvement. And this is basically a summary of the talk, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's give Miriam a big round of applause. Thank you very, very much. So our next presenter is Steve from Sienna, and he's gonna share some architectural considerations for the Metaverse. Welcome, Steve.
All right. So if you may not know Sienna, our contributions in here, think of us, we're the company that developed commercial WDM and commercial coherent detection. And you put those two things together, that's the technologies that have let us take network cores from gigabits to terabits. And so the great thing about being an optical company, it's the foundation for the network. We see everything. We see all the traffic. We see the traffic growth. We see where it's coming, where it's going. And I don't think I've had a conversation with a customer, a partner, a supplier in the last probably 2 or 3 years that didn't touch on AR, VR, XR, or Metaverse. And so what I've tried to do is just abstract it up to a very high level, because almost all those conversations come into one of two categories. I've tried to capture it on here. So on the left-hand side, what have you got? All your different access technologies, right? Enterprise, residential, wireless. And I'll be the first to admit, inside of every one of those boxes is probably starting on a wireless connection of some kind. Could be Wi-Fi, could be a AR, VR headset that's sitting here with millimeter wave, gigabits flowing to a local processor, right? So I'm fully aware we're starting on a wireless environment. We want to get to the cloud. So there's really two questions about it. One is, how far can the cloud be from you, right? Because there's some real physics here. Things have to get out there and get back, right? So that's just physics of propagation. And then how big does that thing have to be? I don't mean necessarily directly to the headset, but what carriers worry about is, what's my infrastructure going to look like? How big of a metro infrastructure, front haul, back haul? I mean, what sizes do I need to have here? Because the great thing is today, every time you put a fiber in the ground, potentially it's terabits if you want it to be. There's great economic reasons we don't light them that way today. We still are in the gigabit region out at the edge typically. But that's the fundamental questions that we have to answer for our customers when they build out the infrastructure, because they're not going to get to do this 5 times in the next 10 years. They're going to get to do it once in the next 10 years, so they want to get it right. So what I've tried to do on here is capture all the different applications people talk about. And I put 2 axes on here, latency across the bottom and bandwidth going up the y-axis. I'm going to call it mean time to cloud. And again, that is from whatever the smart device is at the edge of the network. Your handset, your laptop, your tablet, your crypto miner, whatever you got, right? You have some expectation of user experience out and back to the cloud. I put a whole bunch of different things on here: factories, residences, robots, vehicles, all the different applications people talk about. And there's a number on there I threw up, which is 10 milliseconds. Now, 10 milliseconds is really interesting for a whole bunch of reasons, one of which is if you talk to the medical community, the guys that do a lot of intensity gaming and such, you get latency under 10 milliseconds, and all of a sudden, even the most sensitive people to motion sickness don't feel it, they don't sense it anymore. So it's kind of a nice round number. Now, reality is at 12 or 15 or 9, nobody really knows for sure, but 10's a really nice number. The other reason it's nice is on fiber, just time of flight, just photons going from A to B and back, that's 1,000 kilometers. So right off, because we know network latencies are much larger than that, it's not time of flight on the fiber. It's not distance that's done this to us, it's the way we've built the metro networks. If I plot on there all of the different kinds of applications, that's the red line, about what networks can do today. If I work really, really hard, yeah, I can get sub 10 millisecond networks. But most of them are going to be up tens of milliseconds at the hundreds of milliseconds. And even if they're low latency today, they're going to have variance. Unfortunately, I can give you more examples of people trying to move things to the cloud that worked 99% of the time or 99.9% of the time. But that 1% where it failed, or that 0.1% where it failed, frustrated the application and they couldn't use it. And so they stayed with local servers, they couldn't push it into the cloud. Even simple things like point of sale went that way, right? Because latency today in most networks is not a governed quantity, and it certainly doesn't show up in many SLAs. If you look at things like Internet of Things, if I'm sitting there at my residence, right, I leave, I forgot to close the garage door, I press a button, you close it in a second later, you don't care. But if I'm on a factory floor and I'm closing to an autonomous robot, or I'm doing autonomous forklifts, or I'm really interacting with something, all of a sudden latency becomes very important to me. And if I start plotting through all those, what can I do in the future, you're going to need to move that line way over to the left. Especially if we want to get into things like what has been termed tactile internet, or really immersive kinds of environments. Latency is going to become far more important. And so you say, okay, you said 1,000 kilometers, 10 milliseconds. How much of that total latency budget are you going to put to what classically is known as motion photon? How much of it is going to be in the air interfaces? How much is going to be in the front haul, in the back haul? The first time you go up and down the IP protocol stack, the second time you go up and down that stack, the third time you go up and down that stack. How about when you get into the cloud and you got to process it, and by the way, then you got to go all the way back, right? I haven't seen very many people go solve the whole problem. We're still solving incremental pieces of it. I think to really get AR, VR, XR, Metaverse to work as a community, we have to solve the larger problem. Right? So this gives you a sense of just what's involved. So let's say, again, 1,000 kilometers. I'm going to give just 10% of that whole budget, that whole latency budget. I'm going to give that to the network, just time of flight. What does that tell me? Because that's kind of an interesting thing to know. That tells me the first instance of cloud had better be about 100 kilometers away from me. Right? Because that starts to set kind of a generic geographic distance that says if I'm thinking of my first cloud instance, not everything, but the workload that is most sensitive to latency better be located maybe 100 kilometers away from me. And then all of a sudden you say, well, here I am. Let's start drawing latency circles. You can take an entire geography and break it down into where can things really be if I have to place latency sensitive workloads in certain locations. So this gives us a pretty good sense of distance, right? 100 kilometers or so, gigabits in typical class for capacity. Let's look at the last one here, which is, let's take today's kind of backhaul infrastructure. So this is data that comes right out of internet service providers. And you say, if I invest in a technology, and I've got 10 gig technology, so 10 gig PON, 25 gig, 100 gig, because I'm invoking kind of, as soon as you get to these rates, optical is the place to be. How long do those things last? And we know there's kind of 3 general tiers of consumers out there, which you might call the gig tier, right? Just average users today. You're going to have a multi-gig tier, and then you're going to have the many-gig tier, right? Because that's what this is going to enable. You're going to enable creation and consumption of vast amounts of data. That's what AR, VR, XR is going to do. We're going to move the cloud closer to people. We're going to increase data rates. So we can expect this is what's going to happen. And there are some guesses on here about how long those technologies will last. Right? If you look at the middle, which is probably where most people will end up and where most carriers, most infrastructure providers, that's where they'll make their money. How long will these various technologies last? That tells you, 10 gig that's going out today, 2033, if we're lucky. So why is there such interest in even higher rate PON technologies? Well, that'll get you out into 2036 or so for that mid-tier. Why is there interest in 100 gig PON technologies? That gets you even more future-proofing. So again, when you look at what's the opportunity in front of us, there's so much money now being spent on putting fiber infrastructure out there. And again, I'll remind everybody, you put a fiber in the ground. Technologically, we know how to light that thing to tens of terabits. Okay? Again, good economics why we don't do it today at the edge. But that's the kind of capability that we've enabled as soon as we put fiber in the ground and we get fiber connections. Okay? So with that, I will say thank you and turn it back over to Eugina.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Alexander, CTO of Ciena. So we talked about the architecture. We talked about latency. We talked about the role of millimeter wave. But we have not talked yet about the use cases. So our next presenter, Karine from Orange, is going to talk to you about possible use cases for the metaverse. Welcome.
All right. Okay. So thank you. So first of all, do you know that, well, you may know or not know that 40% of consumers across Europe project themselves by 2025, which is like tomorrow, in some kind of immersive experiences. They have no idea what Metaverse is really, and I think no one knows really. But so it's a mix of immersive experience, virtual reality, projecting just yourself into a world that is different from the 2D web that we know today. I have a strong conviction that, moving from now to 3, 5, 10 years maybe, it will be a natural overlay of virtual reality or mixed reality above our reality. So let's see, as a kid or with my kids, watch video on their phone. When I was a kid, I watched video on TV. I think in 5 years from now, when I get my kids, prepared for school, or when I get myself prepared to go to work, kids will just put, a pair of glasses, a pair of headsets, and they will just, interact with their Disney World, with their Dragon's World, instead of just watching, a few minutes of YouTube. That's just what is going to happen, no matter what. And we gotta be ready to do that. So that's my strong conviction. And I'm Karine. I work for Orange. Orange is present in 26 countries. We're serving more than 250 million customers across the world, mainly Europe, Middle East, Africa. And I want to share with you a few things today. So let's explore together what we've done. We just didn't want to only be theoretical at Orange, so we've decided to explore what does that mean for our customer, because it's very theoretical for the moment. So we've explored a few things. We've explored, and I'm going to show you one of them because of the time constraints, what we called safe zone. So what we've done is we've been where the customers are. Got some of the Metaverse platform that exists today, it's fair to say that there's not a lot of people in it, not a lot of customers interact in this world. And so what we've taken is we've taken the gaming platforms, which we believe are the closest in terms of experiences of what exists today, the closest to the future Metaverse. So we've taken gaming experiences and we've put our feet in the water to understand the customer reaction and what do they do in the gaming. And because we also have a strong view on Orange as a brand, as a trusted brand for our consumer. We want to explore something that we call safe zone. So I'm going to get you a video that explains what it is and then comment a few words. Here you go. Here you go. Okay, so that shows you what we've done as, again, it's not something that it's here for staying. It will actually, sorry, is it? Yeah. So we've launched this on Fortnite and Roblox. So I invite you, if you're a gamer, just to test it. It's the way for us to interact with customers in the way that it's, the closest, I think, way to interact with them, like if it was a Metaverse experience. And obviously, what really matters for us is three things: interacting with the customer by having this gamified experience, right, whereby you as a customer, you are on the game, and so what happens is that you've been asked to answer a few questions about your habits, what you do, what you want to do, and it's really about also cyberbullying and cybersecurity, as you've seen, because there's a lot of things going on, especially for kids and teenagers. And then the next step is getting into what we call the safe zone, which is a kind of a protected zone where you can have a rest as a gamer, and then you can interact, and you can also call on 6 of the countries where we launched. You can call a hotline if you think that you are cyberbullied. So it's a bit of a mix of education, which I strongly believe we need to educate also a consumer, and also for us it's really a feedback loop about what happens in those worlds. Important, we had 1.4 million unique visitors in those zones in a few months, out of which 200K interacted with us directly, which is huge, and it was actually quite big in terms of impact. We didn't expect that to happen, and it was across many countries. So that's something that I think it's really important to for us to learn from, right? And it's still on, so I really invite you. I can give you the maps if you want on such, on Fortnite especially. So now, next is looking back now. once we've done that, we're just thinking, okay, how do we project in the world of, let's say, 2030? 1/3 of active population will be Gen Z. So we strongly believe at Orange that the consumer metaverse will come from Gen Z, Gen A. It will not come from you guys. I don't think we're in it. We'll have to be realistic. Those guys are already super active. They use cryptocurrencies all the time. They're using, gamified experiences. So it's not something that it's not familiar. So maybe for us, we go, oh my God, metaverse for consumer. It's like so far. It's not far. It's tomorrow. And that's really the strong stance we have at Orange, is really focusing on that generation to move across, and to move forward into that world. 30% of active population will be Gen Z. 1/4 of them say they will spend more than an hour a day. Right, an hour a day, it's, compared to smartphone, it's less, obviously. Today, the average is probably 4 to 5 hours. For Gen Z, probably 7 to 8 hours. But still, 1 hour a day, it's something that we obviously have to be mindful and do the right actions as a consumer brand to make sure that we are there for them and that we stay relevant. So now, talking about usage, the way we see the usage for the future, we see 3 verticals. I'm talking consumer here, in case you haven't noticed. I'm consumer focused. So I'm not talking industry, factories, but really the future usage. We see 3 of them: sport, fashion, and obviously gaming. Gaming, I've talked about already. We see like 60-70% of the consumer, will go into the gaming. The gamified experiences will be obviously better than it is now. We see sport as number 2. And then we see also fashion as number 3. So for us, what we do as a brand is we explore with the companies that are really good at gaming. You've seen what we're doing, with Fortnite, Roblox, sport and fashion, to learn together about how consumer behavior will change, how consumer behavior will be demanding in this world of the immersive/metaverse experiences. And that's really how we see things, right? I don't think that I know it all. I'm a, learn-it-all person, and this is how I drive my team. Instead of, thinking theoretically, really getting our feet into the water, understanding what customer reactions are when we do activations, when we are learning from, their in-depth experience with us. As a conclusion, I'm going to be quite optimistic, looking forward to that future of, immersive being a reality. I think, yes, we need stronger networks, for sure, but I really also strongly think that we will have stronger networks. We always been able to support the drive of the new usages, coming from the 3G to the 5G now, whether it's, ADSL to fiber. So I'm a strong believer that this is a massive opportunity for us operators. I'm an operator as a brand to really, serve better our customer in the future. And yes, we will have networks to be ready to answer the future needs of our customer. And I really look forward with, the entire team at Orange of bringing and embrace that new world so that it can really leverage great new experiences for our consumer. Thank you for your attention, and welcome on Fortnite with us. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Corinne, VP of Innovation, Design, and Marketing. I have a Gen Z, and he was born with a cell phone in one hand and with a gaming controller in another. So this was actually very relevant to me. And there was another use case in the US. Restaurant, Burger King launched Metaverse, but I can understand fashion, I can understand sports, but burgers, right? So our next panel is going to talk a little bit more about enterprise use cases for the Metaverse. We dive deeper into the architecture, and we also talk about how mobile operators can monetize Metaverse. So let me sit down, and then, panelists, please, with Alex, introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Alex Courreger. I'm in charge of the innovation lab of Vueling, a low-cost airline from Barcelona.
So
Welcome.
Okay, I'm Katja Henke. I'm with Deutsche Telekom, and at the moment I'm very much involved in the I-14 YLab activities in Berlin. And hand over to Rani.
Thank you. Rani Haibi, I'm CTO of Networking, Edge and Access at the Linux Foundation, where I work with our open source community on defining their vision and future.
My name is Jillian Kaplan, and I am the global head of telecom thought leadership at Dell Technologies.
Welcome, welcome, everyone. So let's start with the difficult question. And Rennie, because you're most technical on this panel, I'm going to throw this one at you. Why is Metaverse a different challenge for networks? How is it different from past revolutions?
Yeah, so I think the order of magnitude of requirements that we're seeing is really different this time. I think if we look at past challenges or transformations, like the move from TDM to IP voice or the move from text-based communication to video, our industry managed to deal with it by throwing a little bit more bandwidth, put more another network interface card in the router, switch the radio technology a little bit, and we got away with it. I think this time it won't cut it, and we need to be very smart and efficient in the way we manage the resources and how we assign them to devices. I think Mariam and Steve were a bit on the conservative side in their presentations on what kind of demands we're going to see, because we're going to see things reaching up to terabytes per second of data. So we have to deploy smart mechanisms to control the allocation of resources. And that also means that we cannot keep the applications out of the game. If we got away in the past with application not knowing anything about the network and not communicating with the network and doing just things like adaptive bandwidth coding, this time it won't cut it, and we need to provide applications with APIs and interfaces to the network so they can request the desired resources and tell the network what they're about to do and get the desired resources.
You're bringing up a really good point about APIs. So Katja, why do they need to be open?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the need for network APIs is really a very important topic here. If we really build this infrastructure that can accommodate the metaverse and also the use cases that may come up, we need flexibility, innovation, and also what is important, an access network, which is also operator agnostic that way. And I think to make this happen, it is really important to work here in an open ecosystem, also of disaggregated networks. So really, to make this happen, we have to work together. That means the CSPs, the vendors, Meta, and create here this network where you can add components and make it work end to end. And you see, I mean, we built infrastructure to be used by many, if not all. And in terms of networks, it really means that it needs to be accessible and that everyone can use it here if you want to create something. Absolutely.
Would you like to add something, Alex, around how you're building interoperability into your metaverse?
We are focused we are focused to find new business model in the metaverse, and one of the things that we are planning to do is the capability to fly between metaverses, bringing your assets and your own avatar, and then for this reason we need the interoperability standardization and the layer, and it's important to have the industry, the whole industry, act as in a foundation about this standard, because we should avoid to repeat the error, for example, with if I use WhatsApp, I need to install Telegram, and need to install all the other messengers applications, and in the metaverse we need to learn the lessons and go to an interoperability paradigm. Yeah.
Great point. So it sounds, Jillian, that one of the use cases is enterprise. But there's obviously a difference between enterprise and immersive experience.
Yeah, so at Dell, you know, we really think of like when we talk about the metaverse, we're talking about like building out the entire world in like a metaverse type experience. And our focus is more on that immersive enterprise experience. And something that was brought up earlier during the presentations about being able to monetize in the space. And the focus up here was more on the consumer space. But we're looking at how we can really help operators build their networks so that they can show enterprises how they can build these immersive technologies to say, Mr. and Mrs. Manufacturer, this is how we're going to build out your factory in this immersive experience type situation. Instead of just showing them, they're actually immersing them in it to see and feel and be. And I think that's extremely important because you're not just, it becomes not just like a talk, it becomes a, hey, we can actually do this for you and putting it into action, which is extremely important for customers. So our focus is on this immersive enterprise versus like building the world out in a metaverse. And there are other companies that are going to focus on that for sure, but we're really focused on helping operators monetize in the enterprise space that way.
Save that thought because we will be talking about monetization as we're closing this panel. So now I'm gonna, if I can see you all, I'm gonna do a little poll. So there are different use cases for the enterprise. For Metaverse, one of them is enterprise. Who believes that Metaverse is enterprise is a good use case? Yeah, okay. Okay, 5 hands, 6 hands. Industrial? More hands. Okay. Consumer? Whole room.
Okay.
Okay, so Rainy, is it surprise to you?
Not a surprise, but not aligned with what we're seeing like on the ground in reality.
Prove the audience wrong.
Yeah, again, not trying to offend the audience, but what we're actually seeing is that the less cool use cases, the industrial ones, are the ones that are materializing first, and we're already seeing them happening as we speak. So things like assisted repair in the field with using AR technology, this is already happening. Things like digital twins, either for a production floor or even for a mobile network. So our communities did a demo last year showing how you can visualize with AR the signal strength of a cellular network and help repair service people take care of the network. So these things are already happening. It seems like the more consumer entertainment immersive ones are kind of hindered by the slow development of headsets, so that's still some time away. But if you think you can get away by not worrying about the metaverse, you should be, because some of these more industrial ones are already happening.
Very, very good point. So, Alex, you are building the metaverse. So
we are starting to build the metaverse.
Okay.
For the reason I agree with the college, because we use another word to describe the current status of the metaverse, and we talk about the protoverse.
Protoverse.
Someday it will be the metaverse, but we are so far. The network is not ready. The batteries in the glasses are not ready. The servers cannot handle 200,000 persons at the same time, and the interoperability is not ready. And it's for the reason that we are to be sure that we are not selling vapor. We have the metaverse in the far horizon of our innovation framework. And then we are constructing the metaverse knowing that we are not in the metaverse.
Mm-hmm. And there are different business models, right, that need to be implemented, Alex?
Yes. It's not only for marketing. We are focused by the moment in one business model is that I explained it before about to allow the capability to travel between metaverses, being willing the company.
And how do you think, thank you, and Katya, how is business models how our business models are aligning with the architecture? What needs to be done?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the end, it's always the business model which stands behind. And I mean, listening to you, Rani, I mean, I mean, you stress, of course, for good reasons, very much business-driven use cases is where the money comes from also. And, but also at the same time, they come along also with high security demands. And that is, once again, important. I mean, to define this, how to do that needs to be done together, especially along the value chain here. So this is really where you need an open approach. That cannot be done just by one company alone. So therefore, you need really to collaborate. And therefore, this really, I can only stress that quite often, an open ecosystem with open APIs is here the key to success. And each party who wants to use then the infrastructure for the metaverse needs to get access to that. So the idea is to define that once and then really to give access to everyone. Mm-hmm. That must be the play.
So openness,
yes,
will help build the right architecture. The right architecture will help to develop the right business models and enable monetization. So any thoughts on monetization, Katya?
On monetization in general, yes, I would say there is, of course, a strong interest from Meta side, from CSP side, so I can imagine others have an interest here. But however, what is needed? Therefore, we need really multi-provider agreements and standards. Also, systems must work similar, fully independent of the access network technologies and also the access providers. And I think what is also important that solutions for resource sharing will be or should be standardized in a way. I know it's not easy and it might take a while. And also, I think it was you mentioning that network capabilities must be really managed in a very intelligent way. Here also further challenges will come up. And in general, I mean, to define this, there are also some activities on the way. The Camera is an initiative that brings together many players, and I think this can be considered a very first good step forward, but more steps to come.
Exciting times.
Yes.
Definitely.
So Gillian, you started this thought about monetization. So how are companies going to help mobile operators monetize the metaverse?
Yeah, I think that really understanding the enterprise use cases as we move into 5G is going to be key to do this. And to my point earlier about bringing them in and showing them what can actually be built is super important. And I think that the point that that was made about Orange earlier, where like, oh, we're trying to figure this out as well as before we deploy it to customers, figure it out ourselves. And that's something we've done at Dell as well. And we were here last year and we had a lab that was open virtually and we had an AR experience for our customers. We moved throughout the year into a more immersive experience. And then this year, our model is actually a full immersive enterprise experience to actually bring you into the lab. And I think that just shows, that this space, and the interest is tenfold, right? And that just is a proof point to why customers, in this case enterprises, right, that we're talking about, need to be able to visualize what they can do in the metaverse. And we're trying to, we prove that out ourselves. And I also think it's a nod to how far the technology's come in the past year, right? We moved from this AR kind of immersive experience to full immersion. So I think understanding the enterprise use cases is key, building them out yourself, and making sure that there is opportunity to monetize those use cases, as in these use cases are going to be the most lucrative for the CSPs.
Yeah, and so you are not just a pipe, right, Rainey?
Yeah, so I think we are in Mobile World Congress among the telecom industry, and it's no secret that with past technologies, the industry have struggled to become more than just the pipe. And I think there is a great opportunity here with the Metaverse to this time make it happen. And I really am excited about all these new emerging APIs. And my advice to all of you would be to pay close attention to those APIs and figure out how you can use them to create new sources of revenue for your company. I think there was an announcement earlier this week by many tier 1 operators, the Open Gateway, where they are making network APIs available to application developers. I think that's the way to go. And I think we'll see more of that happening, and that will open up new revenues for operators.
Last question. And I'm going to ask Alex. You know what I'm going to ask?
Sorry?
You know what I'm going to ask?
Yeah.
What is the momentum? Because the only person on this stage that is building Metaverse is your company. So what is the momentum? What momentum are you seeing?
In volume, because we are looking for the complete Metaverse, for ours, the momentum is not yet ready, okay, for the Metaverse. We thought that the execution, the creation of 3D walls is very laborious. It's not complex, but laborious. Mm-hmm. And we think that the withdrawal of the venture capital that we watched in the last summer from the Metaverse to the artificial intelligence goes in the direction to use transformer models, generative models, to create this kind of walls in an easy way. Maybe in 2 years we can put a novel and then get all the charters, all the scenarios, and then I think that the right momentum will be in the coming years after the explosion of this year about the artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Again, sounds so exciting. Last question to you, Julian. Actually, I have one more question for. Corinne gave me that idea, so we'll save it for the last one. Next to last question. So what is the momentum you're seeing on the vendor side?
From Dell?
From the vendor community?
Yeah, so I would say that, kind of what I just touched on before, that we've moved so quickly in the past 12 months from this AR experience to this VR experience, and the uptake from consumers is like tenfold. When they can see the outcomes, that's where we see the engagement. And the monetization piece hasn't happened yet, but if you look at the percentage difference in engagement when we move into an immersive experience, and you would take that same applicability into how they can monetize with it, I think it's going to be huge. But we've got to, from our perspective, we're going to stick with that immersive enterprise experience versus building out a full metaverse. But it's important that everyone builds what works for them and where they see the opportunity.
Absolutely. We only have 3 minutes left. So I know we didn't prepare for this question. I came up with the question. Corinne is the one to blame. She put that slide, sports, gaming, healthcare, all kinds of metaverse use cases. So my panelists, which is the most exciting metaverse use case? So let's start from Alex and go this way.
For now, gaming, of course. And another interesting thing is the exploration of destinations, because then we can offer a hybrid things, because you can get rewards in the metaverse that you can exchange in the real life. And this is an exciting approach for the current situation of now, that we can execute this kind of metaverse. So far of the complete metaverse, where we will not distinguish between reality from fiction. But now we can do this approach.
Katya?
Here I would speak from a personal view.
Yes.
I mean, looking at my kids, I would say it will be gaming. Although, I mean, I'm curious if they're really willing to wear the glasses for a longer time. Generally speaking, business-wise, I would say it is really in the business. I like the idea of, augmented reality, assisted systems, things like that. I think lots of things will come up really problem-based.
Sorry.
Yeah. For me, it's kind of wishful thinking. I want to see the healthcare metaverse evolve. I think it's a chance for us as technologies to do something really good and not just yet another game. People have been talking to me about use cases of remote consulting and using 3D models of body organs to provide health, and especially if I think about underserved and underprivileged communities, I think that's a really exciting chance of us to provide a technology to really help people.
Wonderful. And Jillian?
I would say I'm not a gamer, but from a personal perspective, I like the retail and the shopping aspect of being able to shop anywhere, anytime, immersively. But I would agree with the healthcare from like a better the world, technology for good perspective, being able to, get the healthcare to people that maybe don't have the access today.
Yeah, wonderful. So, big round of applause. Thank you very much. And thank you to our audience for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.